Hello, how are you? Right, well, I hope you're well. I hope your arm is feeling better. Um, Poor thing. Okay, well, this is the second time I'm reading these chapters because something's going wrong with the upload. And I did it, and it would, well, anyway, I'm reading, and I'm afraid it's only 2 chapters because I think I did it 3 chapters last time and it was too long. So I'm going to have to do 2 chapters, I'm afraid. But what I might do, because it really, the second chapter ends on a. So what I might do, if I've got time, is read the next 2 chapters straight after, so they'll be there. So I hope it works. Chapter 21, The Enchanter Clip Clap. The wishing chair rose up, high up, and flew steadily towards the west. It had a long way to go, so it flew faster than usual, and all its 4 wings flapped swiftly. I wonder where the enchanter lives, said Molly. I hope he won't capture us too. Well, all this would never have happened if we hadn't quarrelled with Binky, said Peter. He wouldn't have gone back home then, and wouldn't have gone out to buy a new handkerchief, and wouldn't have been captured by the yellow bird that swooped down on him and took him away. I shall never quarrel again, said Molly. It made her very sad when she remembered the unkind things she'd said that morning. The chair flew over a wood. Molly leaned over the arm of the chair and looked down. Look, Peter, she said. What's that funny thing sticking out of the wood? Peter looked. It's very, very high stone tower, he said. Isn't it strange? It's just a tower by itself. It doesn't seem to be part of a castle or anything. I say, the chair is flying down to it. Do you suppose this is where the enchanter lives? It must be, said Molly. The children looked eagerly downwards to see what sort of tower this was. It certainly looked very queer. It had a pointed roof, but no chimneys at all. The chair circled all round it as it flew downwards, trying to find a window. But there wasn't a single window to be seen. This really is a very magic sort of tower, said Molly. Not a window anywhere. Well, there must be a door at the bottom to get in by. The chair flew to the ground and stayed there, and the children jumped off. They went to the tower and looked for a door. There wasn't one to be seen. The tower was quite round and very tall indeed, higher than the highest tree, but it had no doors and no windows, so it seemed quite impossible to get into it. Molly and Peter walked round and round it a great many times, but no matter how they looked, they couldn't see a way to get in. Do you suppose Binky's in there? Said Molly at last. Sure to be, said Peter gloomily. We told the chair to take us to where Binky was, you know. Well, what are we going to do? Asked Molly. Shall we call for Binky loudly? No, said Peter at once. If you do that, the enchanter will know we're here and may capture us too. Don't do anything like that, Molly. Well, how else are we going to tell Binky we're here? Said Molly. We must do something, Peter. It's no good standing here looking for doors and windows that aren't there. Shh, said Peter suddenly, and he pulled Molly behind a tree. He had heard a noise. Molly caught hold of the wishing chair and pulled that behind the tree too, and only just in time. There came a loud noise like the clip-clapping of thunder. A great door appeared in the round tower, half as high as the tower itself. It opened, and out came the enchanter Clip-Clap. He was very tall and thin, and he had a long beard that reached the ground. He wore it in a plait, and it looked very queer. See you finish that spell properly, he called to someone in the tower. Then there came another loud clapping noise, just like a roll and the crash of thunder, and the door in the tower closed and vanished. The enchanter strode away through the wood, his head almost as high as the trees. Goodness, said Molly, we only just got behind this tree in time. It's impossible to get into that tower, Peter. We should never know how to make that door appear. What are we going to do? Sighed Peter. I hate to think of poor old Binky, a prisoner in there, And all because we quarrelled with him too. Let's hide the chair under a bush and see if we can find anyone living near here, said Molly. We might find someone who could help us. So they carefully hid the chair under a bramble bush and piled bracken over it too. Then they found a little path and went down it, wondering where it led to. It led to a small and pretty cottage. The name was on the gate, Dimple Cottage. Molly liked the sound of that. She thought they would be quite safe in going there. They knocked, and to their enormous surprise, the door was opened by a brown mouse. She wore a check apron and cap and large slippers on her feet. The children stared. They could never get used to this sort of thing, although they had seen many strange sights by now. Good afternoon, said Peter, and then didn't know what to say. Do you want to see my mistress? Asked the mouse. Well, yes, perhaps that would be a good idea, said Peter. So the mouse asked them in and showed them into a tiny drawing room. What are we going to say? Whispered Peter. But before Molly had time to answer, someone came into the room. It was a small elf with neat silvery wings, silvery golden hair, and a big dimple in her cheek when she smiled. Molly and Peter liked her at once. Good afternoon, she said. What can I do for you? Both talking at once, the two children told her their troubles, how they had quarrelled with Binky, and he had gone home and been caught by the yellow bird belonging to the enchanter Clip-Clap, and how their wishing chair had brought them to this strange tower. But we don't know how to get into it, and we're afraid of being caught by Clip-Clap too, said Peter. I don't know if you can help us. I don't think I can, said the elf, whose name was Dimple. No one knows a spell powerful enough to get into the Enchanter's Tower. I've lived here for 300 years, and no one has ever got into that tower except the Enchanter and his servants and friends. I wouldn't try it if I were you. But we must, said Molly. You see, Binky is our own friend, and we must help him. Yes, we have to help our friends, said the elf. Wait a minute. I wonder if my mouse knows anything that might help us. Harriet! Harriet! The little servant mouse came running in. Yes, madame, she said. Harriet, these children want to get into the Enchanter's Tower, said Dimple. Do you know of any way in? Well, yes, madam, I do, said Harriet. Oh, do you? Cried Molly in delight. Oh, do tell us, Harriet. My auntie lives down in the cellars of the tower, said the little mouse. Sometimes on my day off, I go to see her. And how do you get into the tower? Asked Dimple. Down the mouse hall, of course, said Harriet. There's one on the far side of the tower. I always scamper down there. Oh, said the children in disappointment, looking at the small mouse. We couldn't get down a mouse hole. We're too big. You are a big mouse, but even so, the mouse hole wouldn't take us. Molly was so disappointed that she cried into her handkerchief. Dimple patted her on the back. Don't do that, she said. I can give you a spell to make you small. Then you could slip down the mouse hole with Harriet and see if you can find Binky. Oh, thank you, cried the children in delight. That is kind of you. Dimple went to a shelf and took down a box. Out of it she shook 2 pills. They were queer, because they were green one side and red the other. Here you are, she said. Eat these and you'll be small enough to go down the hole. They taste horrid, but never mind. The children each chewed up a pill. They certainly had a funny taste, but they were very magic indeed, and no sooner were they eaten than Molly and Peter felt as though they were going down in a lift. For they suddenly grew very tiny indeed. They looked up at Dimple, and she seemed enormous to them. Harriet, take off your apron and cap and take these children to your auntie, said Dimple. So Harriet carefully folded up her cap and apron and then went out with the children. She took them to the tower and showed them a small hole under the wall. Down here, she said, and down they all went. Now, that's the end of the chapter, and I have got another one to read. But my thoughts are Why didn't they take another pill? Why didn't Dimple give them another pill for Binky? So that when they found Binky, they could make him small and then he could escape with the children down the house household. Makes sense to me. I'm sure it does to you as well. Chapter 22, The Strange Tower. The hole was dark and smelt a bit funny. Molly clung tightly to Peter's hand. It was strange being so small. Harriet, the mouse, went on in front, and they could see her little gleaming eyes as she turned round now and again. Once Peter trod on her tail, and she gave an angry squeal. "So sorry," said Peter. "I keep forgetting that you have such a long tail, Harriet." At last they came to a place where the tunnel widened out into a room. It was very warm there. A large mouse pounced on Harriet and gave her a hug. "Oh, Auntie, you're at home," said Harriet. "See, I've brought you two children. They want to get into the tower, so I thought they might as well use our mouse tunnel. It's the only way in." "Good afternoon," said Harriet's aunt. She seemed just an ordinary mouse, except that she wore large spectacles. Her home was chiefly made of paper, it seemed. There were hundreds of little bits of it, neatly made into beds and tables. "What are the children going to do?" said Harriet's aunt. We would like to know how to get into the cellars," said Peter. "You see, if you show us the way there, we can get into the tower above and perhaps find the friend we're looking for." "Oh, we'll come this way then," said the aunt. "But look out for the cat, won't you? She sometimes wakes about in the cellar and you don't want her to catch you." She took them down another narrow passage, and then the children found themselves walking out of a hole into a dark, damp cellar. "Goodbye," said the mouse. "I'll put a little candle just inside the hole so that you will know the way back, children. I hope you find your friend." Molly took Peter's hand. The cellar was very dark. A chink of light came from somewhere to the right. "The cellar steps must go up towards that chink of light," said Peter. "Come on. Walk carefully in case we bump into anything. And look out for the cat. We are very small, you know." They found the steps. They seemed very, very big to the children now that they were so tiny, and Peter had to help Molly up each one. At last they got to the top. They looked under the door that stood at the top of the steps. Beyond there was a kitchen. "Do you suppose the enchanter is back yet?" whispered Molly. "No," said Peter. "We would have heard that clip-clapping noise if he'd come back. I think we're safe at the moment, but we must hide at once if we hear him coming. And look out for the cat, Molly." "Can we squeeze under the door, do you think?" asked Molly. But they couldn't. The crack wasn't big enough. And there's a picture of them climbing up the cellar steps. They're massive, aren't they? However, the door wasn't quite closed, and by pushing with all their might, the two children managed to get it just open enough to squeeze through. They looked around. They were in a very big kitchen, or it seemed big to them because they were so tiny. They couldn't see Binky anywhere. "Come on," said Peter, giving Molly his hand. "We'll go into the next room." "Meow!" Suddenly came a voice, and a large tabby cat with green eyes came out from behind a chair. Molly felt quite shaky at the knees. She knew what a mouse must feel like when it saw a cat. What a giant of an animal it seemed. "Don't show it you're frightened," said Peter. "It has smelt us, and we don't smell like mice. Stay here a moment, Molly, and I'll go over to it and stroke what I can reach of it." "Oh, Peter, you are brave," said Molly. Peter walked boldly over to the cat and stroked her legs. She seemed very pleased and purred loudly. Peter beckoned to Molly, and she ran over and stroked the cat too. It was a friendly creature. It went into the next room, purring to Molly and Peter, who followed her. This room was very small and was lit by a candle. No daylight came into the tower because there were no windows. No one was in the little room either. A dish stood on the floor with some milk in it, and a large round basket with a fat cushion on it stood nearby. "This must be the cat's room," said Molly. "There's no furniture in it." I do wonder where Binky is. There were some stairs going upwards from the cat's little room, so the children climbed them with great difficulty, for they were very small and the stairs seemed very big. Before they got to the top, they heard the sound of crying. It was Binky. He must indeed be very unhappy if he was crying. He hardly ever cried. How Molly and Peter tried to climb those stairs quickly. At last they reached the top and found themselves before a big open door. They ran in. Binky was lying on a small bed, crying as if his heart would break. "Binky, Binky, don't cry. We're here to rescue you," shouted Peter, hoping that Binky would hear his voice, for it's a very small one now. Binky did hear it. He sat up at once with the tears still running down his cheeks. He saw Molly and Peter and stared at them in surprise. "Binky," cried Molly, running over to him. "We've come to save you. Cheer up. We got in through a mouse hole after an elf had made us small. How can we save you?" "Oh, you are good, good friends to come and look for me," said Binky, drying his eyes. "I hate being here. I hate this enchanter. He wants me to do bad spells, and I won't. I was afraid I would be here for hundreds of years and never see you again." "Tell us how we can get away," said Peter. "Well, the only way it seems to be the mouse hole you came by, said Binky. "So I suppose the only way out is the mouse hole too. But I'm too big to go that way. See? Well, I'll go back to Dimple's cottage and ask her for a pill to make you small like us." "At last," said Peter at once. "Then, when I bring it back, you can take it and we'll all go down the hole, get Dimple to make us the right size again, find the wishing chair and go home. See?" "It sounds easy enough," said Binky, "but I don't somehow think it will all go quite so nicely as that. Still, we can but try. Leave Molly here with me, Peter, and you can go down the mouse hole again." "We'll see him safely to the cellar door," said Molly. So they all went down the stairs again and were just going through the cat's little room when Binky turned pale. "The enchanter's coming back," he said. "Oh, where can you hide?" "Quick, quick, think of somewhere," cried Molly. And there came a clip-clapping noise like thunder as she spoke. The tower split in half and a door came. It opened and in strode the enchanter, tall and thin, his plaited beard sweeping the ground. But before he had seen the two children, Peter had pulled Molly over to the cat's basket. The big cat was lying there comfortably. The children scrambled in and lay down by the cat, hiding in her thick fur. Binky was left by himself. "I smell children," said the enchanter. "How could children get into your tower, master?" said Binky with a look of surprise. The enchanter sniffed and began to look all round the two rooms. The cat did not stir. Clip-clap stroked her as she passed and she purred, but she stayed in the basket, and Molly and Peter cuddled close into her fur, hoping she wouldn't move at all. The enchanter didn't think of looking in the cat's basket, and he soon gave up the hunt and ran up the stairs, calling to Binky to go with him. "Go quickly now, Peter," whispered Binky before he followed Clip-clap. "Molly can stay with the cat. She's quite safe there." Quick as could be, Peter slipped across the floor to the cellar door, squeezed through the small opening and made his way down the steps. He saw the tiny candlelight burning at the entrance to the mouse hole and ran across to it. In he went and made his way up to the mouse room. Harriet the mouse was still there, talking to her auntie. "Please, will you take me back to Dimple?" asked Peter. "It is very important." Harriet gave him a paw and took him up the hole, out again into the open air. Then they hurried together to Dimple's cottage. Soon Peter had told Dimple all that had happened, and she gave him another red and green pill, and warned him to be careful not to let Clip-clap see him. Then off went Peter to the mouse hole again. Binky would soon be safe. You can see why I wanted to carry on last time when I read it the first time. chapter 23 is The Great Escape. But I'm going to leave it there so that I can hopefully download this, okay, and don't have to read it a third time. Okay. Love you loads. Bye-bye. Mwah.